a quick explanation to everyone that may be new to StarCraft 2, but that does know Warcraft 3. Warcraft 3, of course, came out first before StarCraft 2. And StarCraft 2 builds upon the legacy of StarCraft 1. I don't know if you've ever played that, I'll assume not. StarCraft 1, you had a maximum unit selection limit of 12. You had maximum control group of 9, which meant that you actually couldn't control many of the units altogether. In StarCraft 2, you can make groups as big as you want. You can have hundreds or thousands of units in one group. Unlimited selection. The way that they solve how many units you can display on the UI in the bottom of your HUD is paging, page 1, 2, 3. So if you have a lot of Zerglings and you want to select a Zergling from the third tab, there's a little number 1, number 2, number 3 at the bottom. You can click on number 3 and you can find the units you want there. So that's how you can control. This has led to people being able to put all their units in one group, and therefore the death ball syndrome, the F2 move or the F8 move, people call it F2ing. F2 is select all army everywhere on the map, and then you can do one big push attack. This is something that you can do in SC2, but it's also, while it's a strength, it's a weakness as well. SC2 doesn't have heroes compared to Warcraft 3. That means when you kill units, the only thing that matters is the unit is dead. You don't get experience from it. You don't create space to find creeps to be killed so that you can level up more and get more items and so on. StarCraft 2 is a numbers game and an economics game. It's about upgrades and timings. Very important in SC2 are the timings. It's also a lot less forgiving than Warcraft 3. The strength and the backbone of Warcraft 3 heroes rubber bands many weaknesses away. For instance, a very strong unit in Warcraft 3, like a Griffin, can be soloed by a Blade Master with Lightning Orb. Be surprised by one Griffin and you're still fine. Be surprised by 4 Wind Riders as an elf with no anti-air and you're still fine because you have Orb of Venom. Yeah, and it's totally fine. Your wisps are hidden in your gold mine. SC2 is unforgiving in every sense of the word. If there is a Dark Templar that is intending to harass, Dark Templar is like the Blade Master, but he doesn't reveal himself when he attacks. So he can actually kill everything without ever being seen. If you happen to lack any detection to see invisible units, you will die. You'll lose the game. StarCraft 2 games can be 10 minutes of build up and 2 seconds of fight and it's over. That doesn't mean that that is the only way the game is played. The better you get, the more evenly matched players are, the more experienced you are at defending and managing all kinds of situations, the more the game can be drawn out, and that's where the real magic of SC2 happens. In SC2, the process of training is very different than Warcraft 3. Whereas in Warcraft 3, maybe with the exception of Hitman and Happy, you very much you play by feeling and decision making a lot. You've got more time to think. You creep and you find items, and you have to respond to new information all the time, such as what item do you get, right? Which creep camps are still available. You're doing a lot of active thinking. You're still autopiloting as well, but there's a lot of new information that can happen. In SC2, it's more like a science experiment with controlled conditions. The conditions are a lot more controllable. There is almost no RNG in StarCraft 2. Practically none, maybe where you spawn sometimes. That means that you can have games that are very similar to one another. Your first game of the day can be the same as the second, as the third, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth, the seventh. You can make different decisions and improve, but the games can play out roughly the same. It's a very gradual development of your army that typically tends to have the same components in order to deal with a certain matchup. This is both the charm and the downside sometimes of it when you compare it to Warcraft 3. Because in Warcraft 3 you also make a lot of the same units, but the uniqueness comes from different items, sometimes a different hero pick, but also different items you find. Sometimes the Lich is like a monster machine gun, and sometimes he has 3 rings of protection. In SC2, the beauty of it is reiterating on the process, iterating and iterating and iterating, and constantly being a little bit faster. Basically, when you think of how Hitman and Happy play in Warcraft 3, every top level SC2 player is like that. The level, I feel like still, in top level of SC2 is higher. The difficulty of execution is higher than in Warcraft 3. I think when you look at Happy and Hitman and maybe Lin, you see the level of execution that players need to have to compete at the high level. But even the top players from Oceania in StarCraft 2 are not as good as Happy and Hitman in terms of their execution, in my opinion. So it isn't a huge gap, but the very, very top of the world in SC2, just because there's a few more players, have also been driven to be more excellent than the most of the top players. Here's what's fun about SC2. When you, let's say, because I've experienced the start of SC2 and the growing up and the leveling up in your skill of SC2, here's what's fun. First, there were basic rush strategies, and they seemed to be almost unbeatable. It was easy to win with them, they were easy to perform. You make a certain build, you attack with a big army, and you win. Learning to defend those with less units than they use, by positioning well, microing well, and understanding the timings and learning exactly at what time the attack comes and being ready for it, while being more greedy and building up your economy behind it so that you have a future when they don't, is an incredibly satisfying experience. Another thing that's really satisfying is when people, let's say people typically attack at the 7-minute mark with X army size, and then you find a way to optimize your build to be more efficient, that you can attack with the same army size 30 seconds earlier. And 30 seconds may not sound like a lot, but it is. So you attack 30 seconds earlier with the same amount of units, which means that they are missing a full round of production of units compared to what they expect. They've already practiced so much and they are expecting to be able to hold your attack, but you've got 3 more units, and that's the breaking point. The level of satisfaction you get from that is really delicious. And that's just a simplification. There's many ways to streamline your play, and the beauty of SC2, it's like artisanship of a statue. Every day you chip at the statue until you achieve the perfect form in your creation, and you admire it and you look at it and you think, yes, it's perfect now. Until the next time you chip a little bit more on it. So it's not like wildly different every time, but it's very micro intensive, macro intensive. You're constantly stressing, your armpits are sweaty, and you're constantly trying to hit earlier and earlier timings. A perfect game of SC2, everything will be flowing. You have exactly enough minerals and gas at the time where it is required. You'll be building buildings at the right time, everything lines up, and right when your army is on the enemy's doorstep, your upgrades are finishing. Your second attack upgrade finishes, your blink upgrade finishes, and you start fighting away. And that's a thing of beauty. On the flip side, you'll constantly be faced with your own inadequacy as you're making a million mistakes under the sun. You lose to this thing, that thing, this thing, that thing. You make a mistake here, you get supply blocked, which is like food blocked, right? No burrow. And that's the process and the grind of SC2 play. It's a great measurement of your own personal skill improvement, and it's a lot of fun. And I'm going to go to my next game now. Yeah, Warcraft 3 is biology class, and SC2 is physics. I like that. Or maybe Warcraft 3 is like chemistry. SC2 is physics. One allows for deviation in the experiment, and the other is like it just is like that. One is StarCraft 2 is theory, and Warcraft 3 is like the real nitty-gritty world. What race are we now against? We are against Protoss. Protoss Mirror. I'm going to be building my first pylon on the high ground. In Legacy of the Void, players start with 12 workers, which has cut away the first few minutes of the game from when we used to start with just 6 workers, which is a pretty interesting change that I think has been beneficial for the game. You need to have a 1-gap opening so that you can have a double big building blockage with a 1-gap opening, so that if someone tries to scout you with an adept, which has a ghost form, can squeeze past units, you can actually build a pylon to block them out from getting information right at that time. He's checking for photon cannon rush. He himself is not photon cannoning. Oh yeah, I forgot that it's double fast gas in Protoss Mirror. We follow suit. 2-2 in gas is more efficient, faster mining than 1-3, even though you have the same amount of probes working on something. Thank you for the sub. There's the second gateway. He has a 1 pylon gap opening. I'm denying one of his mineral mining field so that I reduce his mineral income. These are just one of the many different ways that you can try to gain little leads in SC2.
Research complete.
You require my skills. Cold is the void.
You must place that in a power field.
Very wise.
You have not enough minerals.
I am the voice of the eclipse. I am here in the shadows. I am the voice. Cold is the void. We are one with the shadows. I am the heart. I am the You require my skills. We are one with the shadows. I am here in the shadows. Sleep. Intriguing.
Research complete. Not enough energy.
GG. This game. So he actually expanded earlier, and we can see that in the graphs as well, which is another thing I love about the SC2 UI. You look at the workers active. I plateaued at 25 and I held, and I made an expansion so that I have some kind of future and also nuance to the build, so I can spread out my main mineral probes to my expansion. But I was practically like an all-in Andy. He went from 25 workers. You can see that I was a little bit more efficient in the speed of my probe production as well, just staying 1 or 2 probes ahead at all times, which gives me just a little bit more resource collection rate. You can see I'm the blue line. And then finally he was like, okay, I got my expansion. I'm gonna double make probes for a while. Small stop, made another 1-2 probes, made another 2 to 3 probes. He went to 32, I'm at 25, so he's mining more. His income is greater-ish, but not really that much, because he started to have to pull workers. So I hit at the perfect time, just as he was about to overtake me in resource collection. And you look at my army value was actually almost double, because I put everything towards getting 1 fighting tech, blink, and way more stalkers. So I had practically double the amount of workers that he had. A lot of investments that maybe he made in his build order, which we can also see here, were not going to be useful. He started Protoss ground weapons at 4 minutes. He started charge. He started a robotics facility. None of that came into play. None of it finished. I started the Twilight Council a full minute earlier before he started all those techs. And I started my blink, and it finishes at 5 minutes. or whatever, 5-6 minutes. Yeah, 5 minutes maybe. And yeah, none of what he had really came into play yet. Now, why is what I do not always the norm? Well, there's a few things he could have done. He could have had more shield batteries for defense, static defense. He could scout, see what I'm doing and prepare, stop all probe production and put all of his chrono boosts towards unit production to try and hold my attack. His robo facility could have been earlier by not going for a forge so early and getting attack upgrades. He could have had 1 or 2 immortals out maybe. He could have even gone for Dark Templars or Oracles, since my scouting was basically non-existent, and he could have had a Dark Templar or an Oracle in my worker line killing 10, 20 workers, and I would have nothing to defend against it. I was a blind all-in ladder avatar of cheese, not safe, just risk, attacked with it and won. So while I did win, this is not a sustainable way for me to play, really. He was greedy in a way of spreading across many different tech routes. I was greedy by spreading only into one and not making sure that I'm safe while doing it. I won't be playing like this unless I have a solid read on someone that they won't be doing Oracles or Dark Templar. But on ladder, I can't possibly know. So I just took that risk for enjoyment. And because I didn't fully plan out my build enough yet. But there's kind of in a nutshell what happened there. Yeah, I like the new maps in Legacy, Masayume. Could you explain the strengths and weaknesses of each race? Yeah, Zerg has very little splash damage. Zerg has really high movement speed and single target damage. They have a bit of splash via the Ravager, the fungal growth from the Infestor, and the Lurker spines. Those are splash, but they're perhaps slightly less iconically used than the single target damage of Hydralisks, Roaches, Ravagers, Ultras, and Banes. Yeah, as a Protoss player, I mostly face single target damage as a Protoss player. Muta is not really splash, it's spread, it's not the same. Protoss has a lot of splash damage, is fairly slow, doesn't have the biggest single target damage usually, so they don't kill buildings as quickly as Terran or Zerg. So Protoss doesn't kill buildings as quickly, they generally don't want to base trade, they're the worst at it. What Protoss is best at is, supposedly, is efficiency and defense. They have splash damage, high tech, efficiency and defense. So Protoss tends to really try and defend all kinds of little multi-pronged attacks, big all-ins from Zergs and Terrans, while they go for the highest tech units there are. High Templar, Archons, Carriers, Tempest, and so on. Zerg is the one that has the most flexibility in their production. They can put a lot of power towards economy, or they can put a lot of power towards army. Economy and army for them are melded into one production channel. For Protoss and Terran, it's separate, so that's really interesting about Zerg. Zerg also has the most vision because of creep tumors and overlords and Zerglings everywhere. So Zerg, they have the vision, they have the scouting, they have the ability to choose the channel, economy or army. They've got the movement speed, but they don't always have the efficiency, so they need a little bit more money and a bit more army. They may not trade as efficiently, but they can rapidly switch between different tech paths and economy and army production. So that's special about Zerg. And then there is Terran. Terran is perhaps the most micro-intensive race. They can feel very squishy. They're also really good at defense. And they're good at harassment. But when they attack with their main army, they are under threat from a million different F my life screw-ups. They can walk into banelings, they can walk into lurkers, into an ultralist trap, fungal growth, they can walk into dark swarm. Is that still a thing? They can walk into Psystorm, disruptor shots, colossus shots, force field cutoffs. There's so many things that Terran army can mess up in. But when microed perfectly, which is an almost impossibly high ceiling, Terran might be the best, but it's so hard to reach that actually probably they are not. But I'm not really talking about who's strongest or weakest. The opinions on this are heavily divided. But Terran is explosive. They explode quickly, but they can kill quickly as well. Very micro and multitask intensive.